It's an absolute honor to have you here on the
Oh my
Diamond
God.
Octave.
Mhm.
And for anyone who is new to John, which if you're familiar with me and my work, I'm sure you have seen him in the beautiful collaborations that we have shared. John is the founder and host of Beyond the Ordinary show. And from my experience of you, you're a magnificent superhuman. I was going to say human, but superhuman with a fierce capacity for empathy in the
Mm.
context of the diversity and dynamism of multi-dimensional perspectives that you hold. So having this mass capacity to hold all of these diverse perspectives simultaneously and still hold them all in complete unconditional love, which is just, it's stunning, and it's a skill, and it's a craft and an art form, and it's who you be. And I'm so honored to know you and to be sharing this conversation with you this evening. So one of the first things that I wanted to ask you was, because this is, this is how it goes. What is most present in alive for you in your experience right now? So any insight,
Oh,
learning?
such a great question. Most present and alive, it's presence.
Oh,
Presence is just leading everything, and it's such a. I thought I was present before, and this level of presence, it's called me into. There's a calibration that's been happening over the months that's leading me even deeper into that, and that presence is. It's creating a sense of peace
mm,
and also a sense of knowing that's flowing through me. And so I find that when I divert from that presence, when I get off center, that it's very quick that I'm to notice it. And I can feel the discomfort of pulling myself away, whether my mind or my body or even my etheric field communicates me.
mm,
And it's easier. I'm finding it easier to navigate back in where perhaps it would go unrecognized because something else would take over the ego or the to-do or whatever it was that I was getting away from myself.
mm.
And it's landing more and more often
Yeah.
in that center space. And it's pretty wonderful.
Right, that's the place
Yeah.
to be. So a question, how do you hold the multidimensional field while also, or be aware of it, all of the potentials, possibilities, timelines, who and what you be at a grand scale, while staying palpably laser focused in the present moment in connection and relationship to
Mhm.
what is before you?
But well, that's really interesting because I'm finding that the mechanics of that come in organically the more I'm present. And so before, if I was holding a container or in a space with someone else or on the show in particular, I could feel that I was kind of working at it, if you will. There was an energy transfer that was happening. It still came in pretty easily, but I'm finding now that there's an organic flow that's happening. And the information, the translation, the conversation, the intimacy, it just comes in like the efforting in whatever way perhaps that was happening before. It's not that it felt like efforting before, but again, in this presence and in this breath, I'm finding that that information, perhaps I feel it more embodied than outside of myself. And there's a big difference in that.
Yes, yes, that's huge. That's a huge one for
Mm-hmm.
a lot of people in the spiritual community, is staying deeply, richly embodied and connected to their, their sensory perceptions, but far beyond what we can taste, touch, see, hear, feel. But having that grand, expanded periphery, but also staying deeply embodied and connected to how we feel, what's going on, are we breathing? Just very simple somatic things that we can lose awareness of when our mind is expanded at such a great capacity. So to stay anchored and rooted in that space and to really engage the fullness of our being in what we're doing. And it also brings online so much more strength and power.
Oh my God, not only strength and power, but our capacity to feel. It awakens and enlivens our sensuality, our sexuality, our perceptions in different ways. It feels like we're becoming more alive than we've ever been alive before because of our capacity to be in awareness of these subtle realms within our own humanness as we embody more and incorporate that marriage of the etheric field with our humanness. It's amazing. So what I'm discovering, it's like as we rise in vibration, we get in that center, which then it rises to the top. And so the density, the limiting forms that would have us in anxiety or overwhelm or other things, as they diminish, I'm finding that it's not that we're ascending, is that our capacity to expand our field is meeting that energy in a different place, because we're so extended not only up, but out as well. Then we're forming our own cosmos, or having a relationship with a cosmos that seemed just outside our periphery energetically. And we're merging with it, and we're having a different relationship with it. And our body is getting to benefit from that experience in ways that it hasn't before.
Yeah, so much. I mean, the way that I experience it is, I mean, it's potent electric aliveness, just the sheer power of the cosmos rushing through our system and being open and available for that to happen continuously. And so with that, on a practical level, in your experience, how do you synergize, we'll say, the flow of your experience and being hyper present in that flow, and the discipline, the planning, the practicalities? And is there anything in specific? I had to bring it out. And so with that aspect, and then also, is there anything that you uniquely do in your experience that allows for that flow to be online more seamlessly?
That's such a great question, and it's difficult to answer in different ways, because there's a different flow, and there's not like one way of being. Like, some people are really good planning things out and setting containers and doing things, and for me, it comes up just, again, there's this somatic response. It's like, yes, that's open, that's available, that isn't, and trusting that. There's a deep sense of trusting what's flowing through me. I have deadlines and things that I have to do, and I keep hearing not yet. It's like, okay. It's like, I'm supposed to go meet someone at a certain time. It's like, no, go an hour later, and everything shows. It's like everything just kind of seems to, but it could be counterproductive, because my mind, in the way that I've planned before, wants to lead the show and organize. But then there is a component of, I have to be here at this time and organize this and that. And there's somehow, and I wish I could explain it, but again, by being in that presence, there's an intelligence. It's intuitive, but it knows where to guide you, and it's breathing into that. And I'm finding breath work is beautiful right now, to breathe in. So a lot of people, like Wim Hof, is amazing breathwork techniques, going in and just with the box breathing that we can do. And it's wonderful, because it can help take our sympathetic nervous system and take it into a parasympathetic response, which then helps to entrain our brain with, hold on a second, the worst case scenario, the fight or flight response doesn't have to lead, and we can settle in and allow our critical thinking to merge with the impulse of the body, the somatic experience, to determine a different way of being. So for me, breathing in, and actually doing a reverse breath, actually breathing in and holding at the bottom at the root chakra. And it just helps me drop in. And when I do that, I find that, again, my field tends to expand from that place. And while the root chakra can be considered a very masculine type of, we're going to go do, we've got to go create, we've got to procreate, for the masculine type of energy, it tends to be very patient. It slows down, holding it there, and it wants to create. So it doesn't just want to create for the sake of creation, because if this opportunity passes, you won't have it again. It wants to create from a different foundational level. It wants to create sustainably and progressively, because there's something in the creation that's going to build on the next creation and the next creation. And there's an awareness of that's happening through this integration of the mind, the heart, and our etheric field. It's all I can say. It's a different type of functioning with what is the demands, if you will, that we've given ourselves.
Right, right.
In different ways. And how to, again, really attune to, okay, what really is pressing? What can wait? What's being called in the creativity and the grounding in? And again, being in relationship with all of it, not thinking that if we're not doing, that something's going to deteriorate, something's going to collapse, the shoe's going to drop, or worth isn't what it needs to be because we're not in constant creation mode, which is the old paradigm it seems that we're leaving. Yes. And so I'm discovering that I'm working less. I'm productive in a way that's resulting in greater opportunities that are richer than the small victories that were there before. And it's aligning me with a passion that's bringing something alive in me that I haven't felt in a long time. So the redirection and the breathing in and the holding it, and again, listening to the wisdom of all these parts of me. Even the wisdom, if I do have anxiety or fear or hesitation, it's like, all right, here it is. So I don't try to breathe my anxiety out. I breathe it in and I hold it and be there with it. It's like, okay, there we are. And that allows us to attune, because we've been so taught, we've been so conditioned. It's like, well, you don't want to be anxious, get rid of it as quick as you can. You don't want to be sad, get rid of it as quick as you can. You don't want to be angry, it's not acceptable. And so you don't want to be sexual, you want to be sensual. It's like, that's not acceptable, only in certain containers. And again, we're breathing more into it as we hold that and that intelligence and be with it, rather than pushing it away or making it wrong or being embarrassed by it or judging ourselves for it in whatever way. It's rising and integrating with us, and it's giving us information that we've been pushing away for too long.
Mm-hmm. I'm just completely captivated by the richness in your capacity to be with the micro nuances of your experience and translate it with such eloquence is such a profound gift. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
And so for people who are listening, how would you suggest, because what I'm sensing, it's just such a power and a potency of sovereignty, staying so deeply attuned to your own being without waver, without falter. How do we do that?
To not be afraid about what arises within us. So today, perfect example, I woke up and I was in a beautiful space, and it's like everything was feeling really good. And I had company at the house, and they were wonderful, and we had a great time. It was amazing. And I woke up and I had to go run errands and do my things. And I started feeling like a loneliness arising within me. And it's been raining, kind of overcast. And so it gives to that. But it's like, I can feel this, like, wow, I'm feeling like a little alone or isolated, or like this emotion that's coming up through me. And it's being with that without needing to have something or someone else fill it. But being just like, okay, this doesn't take me off center. It's a richness. It's an intimacy within myself that's arising. And I'm getting to know this part of myself even better. It's communicating something with me out of love. And as I practice that more with the different emotions that come up, so again, I can be centered, but it doesn't mean I won't have my anxious hour when I'm writing checks and doing, finances, or running late for something that I think I'm supposed to be in. But at the same time going, I'm trusting that it's perfect timing.
Yeah.
It's being real with what's there, being present with it. And so you really bring as much as you can to presence. And I want to share this. I had an experience about a month and a half ago, and I was in a deep process, and I got taken on this journey. And I was passed out. My eyes were closed, and I started seeing colors, and I started seeing energy, and I started witnessing creation. I started seeing creation in this state, and it was so beautiful. And I was in awe. I describe it like being a 4-year-old on acid at Disney World. It's like, whoa, it's amazing. Oh my, right? It was that,
that's it.
and watching God creating, and it was blissful. And it was just like, I was in awe and wonder in that process. It was, the words don't describe it. And so that analogy kind of gives us a little bit of the strength or the potency of what I was feeling. And it was so much more than that. And again, in the place of just awe and wonder of what I was witnessing. And the second I dropped out of my presence with it, I went somewhere else to analyze it, to do something with my mind. And it's like, the field collapsed. And I was like I'll call it a doldrum. It's like, it was boring. It's like grayish. And it's like, oh, interesting. And how do I get myself back? And when I surrendered to the present moment again, it came back up. And the awe and the wonder from that space and feeling my body in that. And then again, I diverted again. I went into my mind and it collapsed again. And that happened a few times. And I think in that process, I was really being shown how to attune more to that centeredness. It's like, what a miracle to be in that present moment. I can't say without a gender. We're human, and of course we're constantly seeking and growing and aligning with relationship because we relate to one another, and that's how we know ourselves. But it's less of an agenda than it was before. There's such a beautiful receiving of the gifts that are gifted to me on a daily basis in the moment. Like being on this call with you and being in your energy and what you carry also, it's such a deep space, such beauty that I get to witness and receive, and remembering that and remembering all the gifts. And it doesn't come from an exercise of gratitude. It comes from being in gratitude.
That's a glorious micro distinguishment.
Yeah.
Can you share a little bit more about that? And also, what I'm hearing is dropping into somatic listening, somatic awareness in order to, and noticing where the mind starts to take us on a stream, which is, in my experience, where things become more limited or dense, or there's the fullness of that flow, that flowering, that blossom, that organic duplication of self seems to kind of, it is not diminishing, but our perception of it begins to diminish when the mind starts to take us on these trails. And so how do we recognize rapidly when that's happening and come back to the space of active surrender or active allowing?
There's different practices that I would recommend, but you'll notice it somatically. Like your body will be able to tell. And when I'm in this space on a more continuous basis than I have been before, because it doesn't run the show all the time, but it runs it a lot lately. There's a feeling of ecstasy, of energy that runs through it. It almost feels like I'm in the meditation on a consistent basis. It just feels so peaceful and so alive, but so powerful and innocent at the same time. There's this combination of qualities that you feel into. You just know it. And getting off of it, your body will respond. It's like when our mind starts wandering, I truly believe that everything that's happened over the last year, or of course over the last 5 to 10 years, but more dramatically over the last year, where we've had to drop in and pause and be with ourselves perhaps, or be with others in ways that maybe we haven't been ever. That it created our ability to tune into things that we haven't tuned into before. And so in that, we're getting the response. We're recognizing those cues within our body and our energetic system to notice when we're off. So start paying attention more to those cues. Listen to your body. Feel when your mind has gone somewhere else. If you feel like you're disassociated, you're anxious, you're checked out. And sometimes that's okay, but notice, like, I'm checked out, and just being, check it out. Like, I left myself. It's like, okay, cool. I think I'm going to come back over here, or I'm going to stay checked out for a while longer. This kind of feels good, and not judging it. and allowing it to, again, get back into the balance of what's organically unfolding for you. Because if we try to manipulate an outcome, it's a manipulation, it's a structure, it's another mental construct, and we take ourselves away from that center. But if we can be with what is, there's a balancing that's happening. It starts flowing in, and organically it just is, it becomes.
Such a gorgeous space that we've had to, we'll come to those deep, rich inner soils of our being, and one, recognize how safe it is there.
Yes.
Two, recognize how powerful it is, and then witness its awe-striking effects and capacity to create without us needing to control every detail of our experience. And it's like, oh wow, this was accessible in the core of my being this whole time. And so all of the ways that we have attached creation or outcomes to certain things that we're doing, certain places or spaces that we're engaged or involved in, all of those threads start to vaporize, and all of that energy comes right back here to the 0 point in the center of our being. And we recognize that we can shift our frequency or our state in any moment by going into that depth of surrender or internal quietude, and the whole field immediately reorients itself and begins to orchestrate things in resonance with our being. I mean, that's the profound gift of what it is to be in flow, because it's a simultaneous creative process. You know, the past and the future are simultaneously being reorchestrated.
Yes.
It's just so poignant in that space. And there was a question in there that I wanted to ask you. Okay, so creation then. From this space of deep, vast embodiment, how do we progressively and sustainably create our reality with all of those gorgeous multidimensional ways that we experience ourselves and express and create in the world? So how do we ground that into just our day-to-day lives?
Well, for me, it starts with not the how, but we have to actually go back to the beginning of the blueprints, is the why. Why is it that we're creating? And there's so many beautiful people creating so many things, and it's fascinating what's out there. And I truly believe that there's an octave of creation that is being embedded, where we're forming new foundations for the structures that don't serve anymore. And they're happening in lots of different ways. The subtle realm, it's, God, we can see that much of like this infinite space of what's really available. So the whys and the hows and all of these possibilities that exist, to encapsulate them. We're not give credit to everybody's individual process. But for me, in the creation, it's really anchoring in the why first and feeling into. So in the field that I work in, I work with a lot of esoteric teachers, and a lot of people doing ascension work, and a lot of people working with their clients, overcoming limiting beliefs and forming new paradigms and stepping into new timelines. And it's wonderful. And one of the most difficult things for me to understand, and this is my interpretation of it, and it doesn't have to be true, but whenever I hear someone saying that they're doing the work that they do to serve humanity, to help others, to bring other people up into a particular place, it's beautiful. It's so amazing. And I just always have to go back for myself. But you have to do it for you first.
Yes.
You have to do it for you first. And what's come up for me around all this integration and this centeredness is the level of self-love that I've acquired as I've acclimated to this. I didn't know that I didn't have before, but I can feel it in a way that's tangible that I couldn't feel before. Self-love was a concept before, but the way that I'm showing up, the clarity of my conversations, the truth telling of my truth, of my truth, and being in conversation, vulnerable in it, but powerful in it at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
Allowing for others' truth to simultaneously flow through. Once I can fill up my cup from there, then I have the capacity to share it with others authentically, integrated, embodied, and landed in such a way that others can receive it and put it into a container.
Mm-hmm.
But to save others for the sake of saving them, to take them into a place that you think is better for them, I think creates a lot of wobble in the field, at least for me. And so as a lot of people that are probably listening to us, I know a lot of people from my community, we're extremely empathic. And when we feel so much and there's no real landing place, it wobbles us out of the field and we don't quite know where to land. So we land somewhere that is based on perhaps an emotion that isn't integrated within us yet.
Ah, yes.
And if we go below the emotion, and again, align, bring in the critical mind. Our critical thinking is so important right now in the way that we're creating, because from the embodied state, there's different ways. The creating from up here, that gestation period is wanting to anchor into this reality. Yes. And so for me, it's important. We have to know why we're doing it for ourselves first.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's the meat and the nectar right there, because that is the service. When we are truly in, we call it decadent self-honor, and we're madly in love with this and what we're creating and what we're bringing forth, and being the perfection of creation emerging in that unto itself is so beyond enough. It is the greatest fulfillment and the greatest reward unto itself, that journey, that process, that unfolding. And then we become the great that we are. We just simply are the greatest service that we can be to all beings, whatever is present with us in our here and now, and also in the ways that we choose to express and give that love to the world through our creations. But there's also something really palpable in there around trusting others to their own blueprint. Rumi, love in such a way that others feel free and fully, just being gracefully detached from the experience that someone else is having, and allowing them to have the fullness of what it is that they're going through without having to do anything, but to trust that that same blueprint, that same inherent perfection is within them. And then, and then we go into questions around, well, what is mission and what is purpose? And all, but it's what you just said. It's the self-love that is ever emergent, that really is the purpose of creation expressing itself.
Right. Well, and in that self-love, in that authenticity and the compassion or the wonder, even the awe of somebody being in their experience. And when we can be in that much self-love that we can align and not take on somebody else's, and we honor theirs at the same time. And not just an honor from a judgmental, but really like being in reverence in their version of divine creation.
Yeah.
When we can be in that flow, what happens, the dynamics of the relationships that we have in our lives change as well. So we really align to what's attuned for us, what's in vibrational accord where we are. Mm-hmm. In so many different ways. So if we're creating a business, having a personal, intimate relationship with someone, the family dynamics that we have, it becomes so much more clear where we are and how we hold that space. And there's a majesty to it.
Yes.
When you're in that, you're just solid. Yes. You can feel it. And of course you can feel the solidness of where someone else is in their own place. But again, there's a different energy that comes up. And so, again, a lot of people that are probably listening to this, whether you know it or not, you're in a position of leadership because of where you're choosing to be with your consciousness and focus on that perhaps a lot of people aren't necessarily, at least that we witness and that we interpret from what we can tell from the way that people are treating each other in this world and what's happening into the environment and all those other things. And again, they're in their version of creation, but you being in this form of a consciousness that can see where that might be doing more harm than good. Actually, not might. It is, if it's deteriorating an energetic flow, then the space that you can hold in your leadership capacity to say, this is my truth and I hold it here, and I invite others to meet me up here, rather than me going down to try to serve, fix, fight.
Yes.
In a way, it's a whole different level of creation that you're on. And from this space, you're creating, you're innovating instead of repeating. You're creating solutions. You're inviting others into a more expanded field of love creation, of divinity, if you will, which is seeking constantly to evolve and explore and get to know outside of itself and the edges. These other things in these paradigms, they're just repeating what's known. And it's a grasp for the known. It's a grasp for control. It's a grasp for that which would keep it somehow safe in its version of what safety is. And we're elevating in different ways through the consciousness. And so again, you as leaders, to hold that in your integrity and to speak it and to be it. That's the shift of consciousness that is being accelerated tremendously now, as far as I can see.
And so, well, one, I just want to recognize and honor the depth of empathy that you're speaking into here. How what you said, reverence, like a true reverence for somebody else's experience, that real open empathy with whatever happens to be going on. And that's, you know, across the board with things that we see happening on a micro to a macro scale in the world, and really having a deep understanding of what may be occurring for them, but also allowing it to be what it is. So with this emergent self and the knowingness that our DNA blueprint contains the full expression of our potential, how do we then interact with our creation? So what I'm getting to is that space where there's the deep listening, the surrendering, the allowing for that organic bloom to take place. And then where we, as gorgeous human beings with the intellectual and the emotional capacities and intelligence that we have, how do we then interact with that? And, you know, it's like, it's the dance, so to speak. Of course, it's a seamless movement the more present we become. How does that surrender become active? How do we engage that?
Well, it's one thing to surrender internally. It's another thing to surrender in vulnerability, projecting out. And so it's one thing to be in your space and to be here and to be in your meditation and to feel yourself in these different realms in your container. And where do you take the wisdom of that and express it out into the world? Without judgment if it's going to be received or not, but because it's your creation that is wanting to project out into this canvas. That's the art that you are putting itself out into the world. And people can interpret that art according to their experience. And so that creation, we have to have output, whether that's expressing your authentic love for your children, but being open about it, like dropping the shields, feeling where you're like tensed up or holding back or have a block up, and just expressing it. Or if there's work that you're guided to get out and it's like, but no, it has to be perfect and it has to land for this. And it's like, no, I'm just going to drop in and allow my authentic expression, even in the beginning, to come out unfiltered. Just let it just come out and letting it start pouring out. And so as we practice the vulnerability of expressing our love for others, the vulnerability of expressing our truth. So imagine having a conversation, a difficult conversation with someone where we don't try to acquiesce and politic our way into a compromise, or being afraid someone's going to be triggered, or being afraid that we're not going to be heard right, or all these other things. But we really spoke from our authenticity, what we really felt. at the moment. And allowing, even if we didn't have the words, giving ourselves permission to fumble through until we really communicate in a way that felt like it is tuned through us, whether it landed or not, but knowing that we allowed that expression to come through. Not to condemn or damn someone else or make us right and make another person wrong, but because that authentic expression in that not only liberates us, but it liberates the other person as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so even the aspects of forgiveness tend to, perhaps they have a component in it because if there was misunderstanding, then we can forgive. We can forgive because of the miscommunication, of the way that we weren't quite taught to communicate so that someone else might be able to hear, because we were trying too hard to balance all these different potentials of how it might turn out into controlling a circumstance. And for a lot of us, we're in situations where it's not going to create a flare-up. It's not going to create violence. Our lives are not going to be in danger if we hold that. And again, we were taught that. And some of us may have experienced that at different times. But if you're in a place where that probably isn't true, then it's really time to start, again, attuning to your centeredness, to your knowing, to what your body knows. And there, not there, be in your leadership. And really allow that flow of communication to stream through. And again, what happens is there's alignment that happens in that we stop vibrating out of our energy field those old patterns that kept repeating because we weren't holding our energy in a way that was really aligned with what we were asking for. And so again, the alignment starts coming in, and you find that different opportunities or that which you had, something better, keeps appearing in the potential of what you can create with. And so it's wonderful. But again, we have to express that truth with power, innocence, and the vulnerability, because it's new and we're stepping into new territory. We're creating from places that we've never created before, and it's going to be uncomfortable, perhaps. But there's ecstasy in the not knowing. There's ecstasy in it being uncomfortable in the birthing process. If you can breathe in the pain, it's like, oh, if I'm in this much pain, something good's happening on the other side.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. After a while, that's exactly what's happening. There's so much creative power in continuously checking in with the solidity and the precision of our own truth and being available to communicate it, because it is what produces the optimal outcome that we sometimes try to acquiesce or, we try to modify our truth because we are afraid of a perception, how we're going to be received, if our life is going to change or fall apart, or what may happen as a result of that. But in the solid expression of that truth, all that we are authentically desiring, even if we haven't given it definition yet, will unfold itself. There's just getting right to the precision of this is something that has supported me in my life, is my exacting values, my standards, what I desire, what I require, my heaven's yeses, my priorities, and clarifying all of those things to laser precision, and being aware of anything that is not quite in that might have been an energetic that I was engaging or embodying or allowing or creating before, but continuing to stay devoted to what that truth is within me, and also bringing that forth in containers where it would have in the past been deeply uncomfortable, and there would have been fears there, fears of rejection, fears of actual physical harm or abuse in some way, fears that the outcome I was desiring wouldn't unfold itself, all kinds of things that were coming up. And I realized how, in a lot of ways, it was irrational, and what was going to work was to embody the exact thing that I was afraid of. And the sheer amount of power that was liberated there, and also the depth of intimacy and connection that that allowed for, as I came from love and reverence for all, but still very solid and connected to my truth and expressing that. And it always works out to the way that I desire it to work out, even when there is a co-creation, even when there is. So that has fascinated me a bit too. And I'm curious, in your creative process, is this all a process of presence unfolding itself, or are there places in the context of that wider presence that you are defining, intending, evoking, deliberately creating very specific things in your life? Are you allowing a vision that is more grand than what your human can potentially perceive to emerge?
I definitely have desires. I definitely have these wants, these things. It's like, there's a richness that I yearn for. I can feel from my heart moving forward. And so there's creation and watching for those opportunities to show up in different ways, which is beautiful. But there is a surrendering that's been happening as to how it shows up. Mm-hmm. There's been a devotion to meeting that energy that can't expect that energy to show up in what I would call my expectation of it. Mm-hmm. And that's a true meeting, because if something has the freedom to meet me in that place and it chooses me, that is a vulnerable receiving. Mm-hmm. It's really, it's raw. It's like, hold on, wait, you're actually, it's like, I didn't manipulate you. In other words, I didn't chase you. I didn't conquer you. I didn't create you from, it's like, it's this grabbing thing that we're used to doing. But to align with that and have that which is for you meet you, mm-hmm. without the need to grasp, it's different for me.
It's so pure.
It's different. And again, I think the hardest thing now, it's beautifully hard, that many of us I would invite you to begin to experience more of, no matter where you are, is to receive, to open, to surrender into the receiving. And something that you said earlier is so important, and how you live your life and how you are met and how you meet things, is that you set a standard for what you want. And the standard, that's huge, because a lot of people create boundaries for what they don't want. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And feel into both energies. And the boundary is going to have you warring with things on a continuous basis. It's not going to allow your body to relax and to attune to the new energies if you're constantly in that sympathetic response with the boundaries, being vigilant, your mind having to be somewhere else. But when you have a standard, you just know what it is. Yeah. And you relax in it. It's like, no, this is where I expect to be met. Mm-hmm. This is how I expect it to show up for me. And I trust that. Yeah. And I trust myself in it. And so remember, in all of the centuries of all of the eons in this human world, and probably the cosmic world as well, if y'all have consciousness into that, there's not been one war that has ended any war. Mm-hmm. We have to stop warring with ourselves. Mm-hmm. We have to start creating structures that create war with others. Boundaries create that separation. Standards invite people into another level of creation. So that, as a tool and an awareness, it's something to practice. And when you have your boundaries, write them down and set the standard and let the boundary go. Be open to receive in ways that you haven't been met before. And trust that the divine is bringing things to us, for us.
Mm-hmm. I just want to Yeah, thank you so much for your pristine clarity with that, because you just liberated so many people. I could feel it. Just aeons of it's just a pivot and focus. We would take a beautiful velvety knife and slice the cake. All of those ways that we try to protect, limit, create boundaries, resist. What we resist persists. We actually energize and fuel and animate and augment in our reality, although our intention internally may not be to do that. But when we shift the focus to what it is that we do desire to, first of all, we set those standards. This is who I get to be now. How awesome is that?
Well, it's creation energy also. When you set a standard, you create. You're being productive. You're moving forward. You're not disintegrating a wall that's going to start aging, that's going to start crumbling eventually, because it can't sustain the forward movement that you're just naturally called to. We're called to grow and to expand. And so we're either growing or we're atrophying. We're dying. And wouldn't you want to be 70, 75 years old, feeling vibrant like you're 40 years old? Because we can. Mm-hmm. We can. But because of these other structures and limitations and the way that we've been conditioned, we've aged. Or lots of the generations have aged. I can't say we've aged. Because I don't quite feel my age. Not even close. But still, it's just interesting what happens when we're aware, when we're in creation energy, and attuned to when you're not, and how that feels in your body, how that feels in your nervous system, how that actually fractals out into any work that you do, into any relationship that you have, into how you treat your kids or your pets, or it's the ripple effects are huge. And either way, and which one do you choose? Yeah. I suggest you choose standards.
Yeah. Well, that's it's so simple. It's so simple. I mean, if there's this world and this world, mm-hmm. There's productivity, pro-generation, creation, and then there's as you said, atrophy, disintegration, that which is not life-giving, and we can in any moment. I mean, even if you think of, these are beautiful spaces to contemplate and to self-inquire and to become curious about. What does a boundary actually do? It's a self-imposed limitation energetically that we create that actually invites the thing that we are creating a boundary against closer to us. Whereas expansion, we're open, and whatever resonates with us is what will come. And so it's all like a tool for self-reflection and self-awareness and self-creation, and defining what those feeling into and defining what those new desires are, but really being fearless in the total sum embodiment of who and what we are, without needing to do that anymore. To create those rigid lines that essentially just we box our own self in. We're not keeping anything out. We're boxing our own self in.
Right.
So and then we can recognize in our minds, it's just so easy. It's just so easy to manifest and create what we want. We can keep our super consciousness pivoted into here now, but also forward looking into the visions that we are bringing forth, and to have a pure creation orientation, a pure creation orientation, and also being in that dance of sacred union and relationship with what is before us. So it ultimately becomes living in vision. And I actually recently discovered a new word that I'm so excited about.
Oh, what word is that?
It's paracosm. And it's where I was like, what is this? What does this mean? And I explored it, and then I felt into the resonance of what the definition was. And I was like, wow, we're all doing this all the time. It's the protagonist of a story. So us as the sovereign, infinite source of our reality, our world that we are constructing and living in, having a subjective relationship with the reality that we are constructing. So we have this romance with our world, so to speak. It's a relationship that we build that allows for the serendipities, the miracles, the animal totems, the whatever, you know, intelligences that we're playing with to arise and show up in our experience. But we're all always anchored in and creating our own paracosm. And it's just an imaginal, fun way to look at this experience that we're a part of. It's like, you know, if I, with the brilliance of our minds and our quantum intelligence, have the opportunity to focus on creation or degeneration, why would I not constantly be reorienting to creation until it just is me, until I become the fullness of that? And it just simplifies things because we can become aware in our own consciousness. And you know, as you said earlier, you become aware of the subtle nuances of your own consciousness and where you're potentially disconnecting from that stream or that solidity. And the orientation gets more rapid and more rapid and more rapid until I just see it as our coding is being polished every time we come back into that alignment. But you become aware of the micro nuances of where, you know, we're going in which directions. And it's just a beautiful, innocent opportunity to look at it, love it, embrace it, and choose fresh, choose anew in the moment what we desire.
Oh my God, I love how you took that word and created this whole synthesis from it and put it into this reality. And it's so good. Yes, absolutely. One of the difficult parts about our creation is, again, we've created from a place before where we could anchor into a future and go to the trajectory and land there. And we're not creating that way anymore. And it's vulnerable because it's nuanced. And again, the presence part of it, it's really the gift, not the outcome, but the journey through and what's coming in, and kind of like the little falls or the big falls and these risings that, again, our body's attuning to be able to hold different energies that we haven't been able to before masterfully. And so it's not that the world around us necessarily is going to change in a dramatic way, but who we be in the world is what's changing in a dramatic way. And because of who we be, the innovations that we look for and the relationships that are filling our hearts through that process get to acclimate to who we are presently and also to who we're becoming. So we're rising together through a very intimate and innocent and vulnerable and expansive and creative and divine way. But it's a step at a time. It's not keeping your eye on the 30 steps ahead. It's, oh, this is the step today, and this is the step. And it's like, oh, wait, something changed in me vibrationally by step 5 that outcome seemed fantastic. But look at this other opportunity that I'm actually attuning to now that I wasn't to before because I wasn't holding the vibrational accord for it necessarily. So be okay with things adjusting or staying the same as you're anchoring out into the field. But know that as you take each step, you're changing along the way. And what you thought was the grand prize, maybe just something to pick up along the way because you're feeling something else that's expanding in front of you that you didn't have the consciousness to see into because you didn't have the vibrational accord to meet it where it was.
The grand prize is who we be.
Exactly. Thank you. Right.
Total exhilaration.
Right. It's the journey. It's the step. Yeah.
I'm just, as you're sharing, seeing the diamond octave, it's just this one eternal now. And we're at the center of this multi-dimensional disco ball diamond. Those are all of the perceptions, the possibilities, and the potentials that are available to us. In any moment, we're just breathing. Our heart is beating, and we're either contracted, we're expanded, but it's all simultaneously occurring in this now. And then that octave, it is breathing and duplicating and unfolding itself, and it's this toroidal flow that just keeps blooming. And so that point of orientation and knowing, we are the master magicians at the center of our paracosm, our multiverse, our omniverse, our world, our creation. And whoever we be, whatever our coding is, so there's a lot of power in allowing the seed of our DNA to naturally emerge, because it contains the perfect blueprint for our existence, like it does everything in nature. But to be always at the center of that experience, knowing that what we choose to be, to align with, so that's an instant point of orientation. I am divine, I am the infinite, expressing in a sacred human body temple. I am that. I'm the fullness of that. We are the fullness of that intelligence. The wholeness in my being is contained in my seed, and nothing can change that. Nothing can take that away. I can't mess that up. It's not going anywhere. It is there. So to even surrender into the relief in the safety of that, who I am destined to be, I shall be. In my mind, my personality, my ego, my identifications, none of that, as beautiful as it all is, will in any way interfere with that intelligence. It will do what it will do. And so we can align to that in who we choose to be. And if we choose to, one, surrender into that, actively surrendering into that and contemplating the nature of who and what we are and what we choose to code ourselves with, our reality must reflect it. And that's all our power to create. It's just right in here. Total freedom, total sovereignty, total liberation.
And that sovereignty comes from a place of achieving mastery. And when you achieve mastery, knowing that you have to surrender it all because you don't really know anything. And in that, it comes from a place of, again, you're moving forward, it's building up in you. And then you get to the place where you realize you don't know. You don't know because there's more. And so you created that container. So if you need to know anything, no wonder.
Ah, yes, yes. And that's the majesty. Go stand out on a cliffside overlooking the ocean. Gaze at some mountains or a river to just connect into the majesty and the magnitude of your beingness. And that's that sense of childlike wonder. It's just to be in that space is the gift, is the reward. And
it's faith. It's faith.
You know, I think there's, in my unique experience, because it's all simultaneously happening and all the stories are true and there's one grand symphony unfolding itself that is eternal and everlasting. It's like in the journey of knowing myself as that, there initially was the ultimate surrender of power and control in order to gain ultimate power and control in its purest state, and also a complete surrender into uncertainty, not knowing, detachment, letting go, loss, all of that, to gain ultimate gnosis of the self. But to be able to hold all of that simultaneously and dynamically in different moments, just as you were speaking into earlier with the navigating through our experience, when it's time to go where and do what, and how that intelligence, I mean, every micro bit of data that comes to us has a transmission, or comes through us, to us, has a transmission and an intelligence. And there's no like blanket statement for, well, this is what this means, or this is how we do this. It's like, we've got to stay so attuned to those subtleties and nuances and the signature of the intelligence that is being made known to our consciousness in any given moment, to truly interpret what is going on in our unique experience, and to be in that, and to trust that flow and that blossoming, and to hold it all, as human and multidimensional divine creator avatar simultaneously. There's moments where I forget and I don't remember what's going on. I don't know what's going on. I need to just chill out for a minute. And then I do that and I'm like, oh, there I am. Okay, cool. That's who I am. That's what I am.
Yeah.
As for the novelties of life, we would be bored so easily if we knew exactly what was going to happen.
Thank you. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think our biggest suffering is that we live in a chaotic universe. It creates from chaos. It creates from all of this movement, but we've been trying to control the chaos. And we can't control the chaos.
Like, strap on your seatbelt, baby, and enjoy the ride.
Yeah.
Enjoy
and
ride.
we'll pluck moments to have a relationship with, when we'll create our realities out of those pluck potentials. But if you're trying to control the chaos, it's good luck to you.
Yeah, it's just be in awe of it. Love it. Let it actually arouse and ignite and turn you on. You know, it's like riding a motorcycle or being on a boat in the middle of the ocean, or, you know, just surrendering into the cosmos, into the vastness of what we be, and allowing, you know, in certain moments we be the ocean and we be directing it. And in certain moments, we're just so surrendered into the waves, and it is carrying us where we are destined to go, and navigating that and doing that dance with life. And I actually had this recognition within the past several years, and it keeps coming, like, I'm turned on by not knowing. I'm turned on by letting go. I'm turned on by, like, because all of that just brings more potency to the present moment. It's like, I mean, I have an awareness, I have a very strong vision and an idea, but I imagine how it wants to come through is so much greater than.
Yeah, but for me, when you're in that space, what you do know is that you're connected to love. And so that impulse, really the seed of it all, is that space of love, and you're meeting it where it wants to meet you, and how that shows up in different scenarios, different scenes in our play. That's the awe and the wonder. It's like, wow, how do I get to be with that which is gifting me its presence in this moment? And you start feeling that it's all happening for us. It's like, oh, I'm attuning into a greater expression of that which I've been seeking all along, but I've been chasing it down the wrong avenues. I've been trying to create it in ways that I can control it, so that I can feel comfortable with what I think it has to be, so that I can live a life in a safety bubble that isn't real. Because the second I'm in that safety bubble and I've created it, I start getting bored. I start going into diminishing my energy for the sake of now sustaining something whose foundation is going to crumble because I made it.
Right, exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Oh, it's so good. Just, staying absolutely open. That's the marvel of life. I was just getting a vision of Mary Poppins, just like singing around and dancing and just being wide open. The whole thing, and just being free, setting ourselves free, liberating ourselves, liberating our creation, allowing others in our experience to be free. I mean, it's called free energy for a reason.
Yeah. Well, and it's important to say again, we're talking about this, and it may seem lofty, and I can tell you that it isn't. Is we start where we are. If we're starting with financial worries, if we're starting with relationships that aren't showing up, and we're in the dross of that, and we're in the underworld of the shadow aspect seeking resolution somehow, as we start there, and again, we take the first step. It's like, okay, how is this showing up for me? And again, with so much compassion for ourselves in that space, truly. And if that's the beginning place, and it starts flowing and growing, and you start recognizing yourself in an intimacy that perhaps wasn't available before. And again, it's a slow process, and in it, Solara, there's a surrender. It's okay, so I'm evicted out of my house. I can't pay the electricity. There's not food on the table. You'll find a place for that. And sometimes our thinking of what it has to be is what's actually keeping us in a prison, and what shows up when we surrender to receiving from another in their grace. We don't know what's going to evolve from that, but there's shame that we're transmuting. There's guilt that we're transmuting. There's circumstances that we have judged, or we thought that we were judged by, that have to transcend the field. They have to integrate in a way where that we can see it for what they were being carried for, and allow it to pass through us so it doesn't control us in the judgment of what it thinks it has to be anymore.
Yeah.
We have to let those go. And they are being let go, but being aware of it is key.
Yes. Absolutely. And the beauty of it, I mean, beauty for me is always the grand harmonizer, because there's so, I mean, even though my name is Solara and it's all about the sun and being an emanation of the light, I love thunder and lightning storms. I love those days where the sky is just lined with silver overcast clouds, and you've got a little bit of teal peeking through the background, and there's a cold burst of air rushing through. And it's like those moments of challenge are pure and utter grace to just give us that opportunity to surrender all the ways that we have been fighting and pushing and struggling and building walls and creating boundaries and being afraid. Now I have to trust. Now I have to open. Now I have to expand, because we call that forth for our own being. We call that forth because we don't want to push anymore. We don't want to struggle. We don't want to have all the rules and the boundaries.
Yeah.
And so our being goes, okay, well, this will help you surrender.
Absolutely.
And it's always good. It's always good. It's always beautiful, all of it. And if we can just remember that in those moments, this is opening me to something so much greater. And even in this, so much character and strength and integrity is being developed and grown and cultivated in the soils in my being, parts of me that I may not have even been aware of before. There's just so much beauty and purpose inherent in all of it. And just knowing that nothing is ever going wrong, and nothing can ever go.
That's so beautiful. Well, and then those points that push us, if you will, to our limits, we actually get to discover who we are.
Yes.
It's like, oh, hold on a second. It's like, okay, who was I during this transition? How did I emerge this? Look at where I'm still standing. Look at what's available. Look at the consciousness that I held without judgment of where that consciousness may have been. But it's like it's like discovering yourself, being in the awe and wonder of who you be during that. So again, not too long ago, I had an experience of going down deep into the dark realms, and it was shadowy, and it was like, my body was hurting, my mind was going, it was exhausting. It's like this energy, it was so powerful. And I got taken into an initiation of an initiation. And again, the shadow and the darkness that was down there was humbling to me.
Yeah. The
subtle realms that I got to experience, and how they were toying with me, if you will, with the power that they carry and who I be. I was like, okay. I bowed to you, and I saw such beauty in what it represented and what it was. And so there was a humility, but emerging from that experience also, and coming back into my embodiment, the capacity, and I have to give myself credit for understanding this, the capacity that I had to be in humility, the capacity that I had to acknowledge it without damning it, without condemning it.
Yeah.
The capacity that I had to hold the center of my light as love. Yes. Survive through all of that. And so it's an aspect of truth that lives inside of me that didn't have to waver away from itself because something else seemed to be more than, or from a different place than, or tried to take something from. I emerged from that recognizing myself, knowing that I can be in such awe and such beauty from that perspective, and still be in integrity with myself.
Yes.
And I think a lot of us are experiencing this in lots of different ways during these times and these waves that we're riding.
Just a solidifier of that integrity, to be able to be, well, one, I mean, in my experiences with some of those energies, I mean, again, you just bow to them. They're so intelligent, and they're there to help you too. They're actually allies in so many ways if we're able to see that.
but we've been taught not to see that. We've been taught to chase it away, make it wrong. It's too much. It's trying to take something from me. And it's perhaps that's part of the initiation.
And perhaps that's a subjective perception, because as the infinite source, can anything ever be taken away?
Thank you. Yeah. Right.
Gorgeous. Well, that feels like a beautiful solid space to complete. Is there anything, is there anything else you'd love to share before we hop off? It has been a tremendous honor to have you, as always, so rich and laced with brilliance and wisdom. I thank you for all that you be.
Thank you. Yeah, the only thing, it's not the only thing, but probably the most profound thing that I would have to say is I love you and thank you.
Yeah, hey, that's it, right? The ultimate transmission.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's the truth. I love you and thank you.
Yeah. I love you and thank you. We love you and we thank you. Yeah. Beautiful.
Bow to you.
So much. Same. You're just a novel within a novel within a novel within a novel, and it's glorious.
You too. It's like, oh my God. It's like how much more richness can you bring in? It's like we can dance in this forever. And it's, again, you open the field and the awareness into like, what else can we create and what else can we bring into awareness? So yeah, it's fun doing this dance with you. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's like infinite weaves, it's like, okay, great. What's next? Let's
play.
Yeah. Beautiful.